Bible truth, line by line, in context, 5-minute lessons. Let's go. Welcome to Bible Bites. All right, guys, the 5-minute lesson starts now. All right, guys, so we left off with Romans 2:9, and we saw that death and life are eternal states of being, okay? And we're going to roll on. We got a lot to do. Romans 2:10. Now, look, we slide back again to this doing good, i.e. well-doing thing. Now, notice the language shift, though, okay? Romans 2:7, well-doing. But Romans 2:10 replaces well-doing with good. Romans 2:7 says seek. But Romans 2:10 replaces seek with worketh. Romans 2:7 says glory, honor, and immortality. But Romans 2:10 replaces that with glory, honor, and peace. Clearly, these passages emphasize the same theme, but they clarify meanings through context. For instance, by Romans 2:7 and 2:10 mirroring each other, we're given a strong indication that immortality and peace are the same concept. But remember, we learned in Romans 2:7 indicates the glory, honor, and immortality we should be seeking is God's. So the peace being subbed in Romans 2:10 must also come from God to us, meaning eternal life is eternal peace with God. And eternal life is pursuing God's glory, honor, and immortality, which you can only have by believing what God has said is the truth, which means eternal life, as far as we know it, is peace with God by seeking the truth about his glory, honor, and immortality, his eternal godhood, which is found in his gospel, and believing that gospel truth will stop us from sinning or doing evil, obeying unrighteousness. That's awesome. Now, question. So, if mankind knew God's truth and dismissed it back then, what's so different now, right? Like, we believed before and then turned away. Death was the reward for that, right? But won't we just turn away again? What's the difference? I don't know, but keep it in the back of your head. That's a question I have, right? So Romans 2:11, Paul states there is no respect of persons with God. Now, this is a direct reference to verse 9 and 10, okay? Look, Romans 2:9, he's talking about who's doing evil, of the Jew first and also of the Gentile. But then in Romans 2:10, he's talking about who's doing good, of the Jew first and also of the Gentile, which aligns perfectly with Romans 1:18. Romans 1:18 says, it is the power of God unto salvation to everyone that believes, to the Jew first and also to the Greek. Now, notice the language shift from Greek to Gentile. Why? Remember, in Romans 1:14, we equate Greeks with wise people. And then in Romans 1:13, prior to that, it shows us that wise or unwise, Greeks are Gentiles, just as barbarians are Gentiles, showing that no category of person is excluded from accessing God's gospel salvation, because no category of persons will be excluded from his judgment. So if Jews need salvation just like Gentiles, then who is not in need of salvation, right? It appears as though everyone has a death judgment hanging over them. We've seen this, right? It's being emphasized. Everyone has a death judgment. Let's keep going. Romans 2:12. Now, here we are introduced to a new concept, right? The law. And here's what we're told. Some have sinned, do evil, right, without the law, and some have sinned, do evil in the law. Those who sin without the law perish without the law. Those who sin in the law shall be judged by the law. Now, let's unpack this, all right? This is going to be a logic train. Stay with me. By context, we know God is wrathful against man because we knew God but did not glorify nor thank him. But instead, we changed the truth of God into a lie, worshiping ourselves, creation, and falling for our lusts of the heart, which led us to unrighteous acts and living, sinful living, right? And although we know God will judge us to death for these acts, which reveal our ungodliness, we do them anyway. And then we take pleasure in it. And because of this dismissal of God's truth, right, this ungodliness, man obeys unrighteousness, we do evil, and God judges us to death. And this consists of indignation, his disgust, his wrath, tribulation, and anguish, right? Which is the opposite of eternal life. because life is actually eternal peace with God, including glory, honor, and immortality. Now think, God's main issue is not believing in him as being who he says he is and what he says he will do. And to God, showing himself through creation is and was more than enough for us to understand his authority and power. So no man has an excuse to deny him, which is why Romans 2:12 says that those without the law perish without law. Creation is proof enough. All right, we're at the 5-minute mark. We're going to stop there. This actually continues and it gets really deep, okay? So I want you to come back soon. I'm going to have the other one put up, and they're really kind of a pair of videos, but it's getting deep, guys. I love this. Let's go. This is Bible Bites.